Uh, Hello, good evening. My name is Harrison Ungert, and I represent one of Ms. Pisano's Lang 120 class. And today I'll be talking on mass incarceration in the United States. I'd like to start off by explaining you a little bit about how this project came around and why I began to research mass incarceration. Earlier in the semester, Ms. Pisano's class went to the Burton Street Peace Garden, which is located in West Asheville. And it started in 2003 together with Dwayne Barton, who we had the pleasure of meeting, and Safi Mahaba. And this was their way of peacefully protesting the war in Iraq and the war on drugs here in the United States. So I love the Peace Garden because it was able to talk about we were able to see this uniqueness and talk about a uniqueness and show the human condition in a very different and original way. First glance, you see a lot of things like the picture on the left, where they just take toys or other objects and they repurpose it into artwork that was left to be interpreted. So I saw this piece on the left of a African American baby doll within a old TV frame, and kind of looks like a Target. It's like a stovetop. And my interpretation or my connection was immediately to the piece on the right, who was artist. She worked a lot during the civil rights movement. Her name's Elizabeth Catlett, and it's called Target Practice. And this piece for me created to show how the African American community or African American citizens here in the United States have been a target for injustice. Yeah. So the United States has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, and is often seen as a very brutal, racialized, and unfair system to minority groups or people of lesser income. Exact numbers change from year to year, but the number of people in prison in the US remains around 700 out of 100,000 people. There are more people in prison now than ever before, even as crime rates continue to drop down. So both the people who study crime and the people who write policies question if the social cost of incarceration exceeds the social benefits, especially for crimes that are nonviolent. So incarceration in the US is socially concentrated among African Americans. At birth, an African American male has a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. By comparison, a white male at birth has less than a 5% chance of going to prison. And that's at birth. From arrest to prosecution to incarceration, African Americans are singled out for increasing policing, from profiling to the types of crimes that are highly enforced. And black men are often charged and prosecuted differently than their white counterparts, and often can't afford proper defenses as well in court. Out of 125,000 federal inmates, 97% have been sentenced for nonviolent crimes. Prison sentences are also higher or also longer than seem reasonable. So there are 1.2 or 1 in 9 African American children born, or 1.2 million, excuse me, or 1 in 9 African American children born to parents who are in prison. So research shows that these children, especially males, have have decreased school achievement and higher rates of behavioral problems and depression than their peers. These male children often turn to criminal activity themselves, making incarceration an inherent trait. So these people become social outcasts because of their time in prison. As social outcasts, they have limited access to good jobs, credit, education, quality health care, and other means of improving their lot in life, unlike everyone else in society. In fact, according to a renowned sociologist, that goes by the name of Bruce Western, he argues that it is not just individuals being put into jail, but whole social groups. We as a nation have created a deprivation of liberty for a group of people who in the United States have never truly been equally represented. So, people are jailed for nonviolent crimes and sentenced for possession of small amount of drugs. As I previously mentioned, out of 125,000 federal inmates, 97% have been sentenced for nonviolent crimes. Prison sentences are also longer than seem reasonable. Here are a few stats. So one of the big ones is the war on drugs. For example, federal law mandates a maximum sentence of 5 years without parole for possessing 5 grams of crack or 3.5 ounces of heroin. For less than 2 ounces of crack, an offender can earn upwards of 10 years, compared to 5 years for 500 grams of cocaine. 100 times the amount of drugs for half the sentence. Perhaps no coincidence, but most cocaine users are white and rich, and most crack users are minorities and poor. This proves the claim that the war on drugs was really just a war on minority citizens in the US. So, the contracting of workforce inmates in private prisons creates the demand for more prisoners. Money is made by the prison administrators and by the corporate stockholders who own shares of those prisons. Companies are laying off regular workers to hire labor from private prisons, where they can pay workers a tiny fraction of what they would normally have to pay. So this drastically increases the profits that companies can earn, with the profits specifically from employing prison labor tripling between 1980 and 1994. In state-run prisons, inmates usually work for minimum wage, except in Colorado, which allows pay as low to $2 an hour. In privately run prisons, the inmates can earn as little as 25 cents per hour for a 6-hour shift, or about $20 a month. So this amounts to little more than slavery when the fact that most of the inmates are black and are black is considered. It begs the question, is this just a new justified form of human bondage? There is historical proof that this is true. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, many freed slaves were charged for petty offenses, often never proven, and then forced to work in cotton fields, mines, or to build railroads. This continued pre-war traditions when slaves were hired out by owners to the state to work on municipal projects. A quote by journalist Vicky Pelez summarizes it perfectly. Quote, "Profits are so good now that there is a new business, importing inmates with long sentences after a law signed by Clinton in 1996 caused overcrowding and violent, unsafe conditions in federal prisons. Private prison corporations in Texas began to contract other states whose prisons were overcrowded, offering a rent-to-sell services." So, end of quote. A strong profit motive ensues, the preservation of the current system. So as the prison industry complex keeps growing, crime is actually decreasing. But there's no correlation between the first trend and the second. In fact, there are so many individuals locked up in the US that the threat of prisons has actually diminished. The possibility of getting caught and facing prison time does not deter crime anymore or make us any safer. Evidence shows that a would-be criminal doesn't really think about the possibility of prison or being caught. Instead of discouraging crime, prisons actually tend to support criminal activity. The lack of proper rehabilitation, mental health care, counseling, and job training make it harder for society to actually re-assimilate these people, or re-assimilate prisoners. And so high recidivism rates ensue. So recidivism rates also reflect the failure of this attitude. The National Institute of Justice reports that in the US, 67.8% of prisoners were rearrested within 3 years of release. Within 5 years of release, that number goes up to 76.6% of released prisoners being rearrested. Recidivism, unfortunately, it is met with longer and harsher sentencing, truly creating a scenario of revolving door justice. In the US, political advantage is given to those who promise to be tough on crime. It is a perennial winning campaign strategy, and it fuels the building of prisons. Drug addicts and the mentally ill are locked up with hardened criminals, with little to no resources to help with their treatment or rehabilitation, or to make sure they do not re-enter prison. Prisons have been given the mandate to punish and not to treat, and corporations are making money from an increasing number of prisoners whose rights are lost in the system and whose voices are not deemed worthy to hear. The point of a business is to cut costs and improve efficiencies. When a business is running a prison, those costs, cuts, and efficiencies squeeze the individuals that are locked up. There's no business advantage to teaching prisoners to lead more socially responsible lives. Taking steps to preserve human dignity in such a setting is costly. In order to fix this, we need to start valuing the human being instead of exploiting them. That's all I have to say. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
Do you come across any initiatives being taken currently to try to solve this problem?
Yeah, so as of right now, I think one of the largest ways to solve this problem is just going out and voting, making sure you know your candidate as well and how they stand on privatization of prisons and stuff. Like I said earlier, it's very politically based with privatization of private prisons have a lot to do with lobbying and relationships between certain states and certain people, and a lot of companies, big companies, use or pay to use these private prisons. Macy's, Boeing, IBM are just some of the ones off the top of my head that I can think. But yeah, also that's another point. Really diving deeper into what companies use private prisons and private prison labor can also help, and boycotting them are just some of the few small steps that you can take. Any other questions? Yeah.
In your research, how far did you look into different presidential administrations and what impacts they had in the past on incarceration rates?
So in my research, I actually watched a documentary called The 13th. It's on Netflix right now. I don't know if any of you guys know it, but it dives way into the history of mass incarceration. Three that I can think of right now would be the Nixon administration, the Reagan administration, and the Clinton. They all had a pretty big part of this idea of the war on drugs and putting more and more people into prisons, militarizing our police. I think Bush was also another one that he actually won a campaign just because he was, this war on drugs and harsher prison sentencing. So that's those people have had a lot to do. Another thing is this idea of a super predator that the documentary also goes way into. Just how we portrayed African Americans in society as being inherently dangerous and stuff like that. And so that also didn't help with us putting more and more African Americans in a prison. Yeah. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.